As the Russia-Ukraine war rages on, Russian President Vladimir Putin says he's open to more peace talks, but the battlefield tells a different story. Despite a looming sanctions deadline from U.S. President Donald Trump, Russia continues its aggressive assaults along the front line, and Ukraine is retaliating. All of this unfolds as both sides accuse each other of stalling negotiations, and questions mount about whether peace is even possible at this stage. And on that note, David Marples, Russian and Ukrainian politics expert, joins Global News today. Thanks for being here, David.
My pleasure.
So let's begin with the war itself. Putin says the momentum is in Russia's favor. How accurate is that assessment on the ground?
It's actually quite difficult to tell. You could say in terms of gradually gaining ground, Russia's gained some ground in the Donetsk region, has reached the border with Dnipropetrovsk region. But in terms of human losses, for example, or genuine progress in other areas, such as attacking cities, trying to push Ukraine into some kind of agreement, it's clearly failing. And Russia's losing an inordinate number of troops on a weekly basis. This is something that even Trump has begun to notice. And it's a question of whether these losses can be sustained indefinitely. So I would say it's a kind of stalemate right now. But Russia does occupy these four regions of Ukraine that it's claiming. Crimea, which it's occupied since 2014, Kherson, and Donetsk and Luhansk in the east.
Okay, well, Putin also claims to support peace talks, yet the war seems to have intensified. What do you make of this contradiction between rhetoric and reality?
I think that the situation for Putin now is that he's got some kind of a deadline from Trump. He's not really sure what to make of it. In the past, Trump has given these threats and then withdrawn them. But if he's serious, this presents a slight problem for Putin in that he needs to get as much as he can within the next few days before he's forced back to the table. On Ukraine's side, it has everything to lose. I mean, Ukraine is in a very difficult situation because no one in the Trump administration is proposing to date that Ukraine should retain the territories it had as an independent state in 1991. And yet these are recognized as Ukrainian territories worldwide, and they've been part of Ukraine now for 3 decades. So that's what is happening. And I think really there's a sort of lack of attention from Western states to this war and a lack of unity among the European Union that Putin is beginning to bank on. For example, countries like Hungary and Slovakia are not on board with full-scale support to Ukraine. They would like some kind of compromise situation. And the European Union needs to be unified in the wake of the instability of the US government and where the United States is regarding NATO alliance and the general commitment to defense of Europe.
Okay, well, I want to talk about the United States. It's drawn a hard line with a sanctions deadline, targeting not just Russia, but its trading partners. Could this shift the calculus for Moscow or its allies like China and India?
Yes, it could, because, I mean, the biggest thing for Moscow has been the export of oil and gas. And this was largely taken up by the European countries, as it has been for decades, even back to the times of the Soviet Union. But since the war, the full-scale war began, then India and other countries have been taking Russian oil, buying Russian oil. If Trump could pressure these countries, India and China specifically, I would say the two main ones, not to purchase Russian oil, then Russia would be in economic difficulties. It's managed to avoid these difficulties so far for precisely that reason, that people are buying up its resources. And it's not made much difference that the Europeans have stopped importing Russian oil and gas. So in a simple nutshell, I think that's the situation for Russia. It would then need to find other countries that were prepared to take it. And I'm not sure that there are other countries right now that would immediately come to the fore, given the threat of American sanctions.
Well, do you think the ongoing talks are genuine efforts at peace or a strategic stalling tactic by the Kremlin, especially ahead of key Western deadlines?
Well, I think there's always been a tendency of the Kremlin to see how far they can go and to see how far Trump can be exploited. And this worked very well to begin with. Russia came to a couple of peace conferences with low-level personnel, never made any promises, and then went back to bombing and missiles, cruise missiles, and drone attacks on Ukrainian cities. It's the same situation now. And I think it's imperative that the United States show some kind of show of force. This week we saw when former President Dmitry Medvedev made some rash comments on Twitter, Trump immediately jumped in and moved nuclear submarines closer to the Russian border. That's the kind of reaction that we would need to see from the Americans if Putin is really going to come to the table in any kind of serious fashion. There's no real impetus for him to do so otherwise. As for the Ukrainians, they're in a sort of paradoxical situation where if Russia does come to the table and agrees to stop the war right now with the existing territories, they would have a lot to lose, and it'd be very difficult for President Zelensky to get through his own parliament. He may well lose power if he concedes that territory. So for Ukraine, it's also a very difficult situation. But right now, with Russia being the main problem, Ukraine is quite happy to say, we'll come to the table, just get the Russians to come as well, and make sure it's high-level people and not people from the culture ministry or something like that.
Putin has been framing this as a broader European security issue. Based on your knowledge, would you agree that's what's driving this war?
No, I don't agree with that assessment. I know it's been bandied around as well by some Western scholars. I don't see this war as one to stop the enlargement of NATO. That has taken place really at the request of the countries joining NATO. And after Finland and Sweden joined after this recent war started, there was no response from Russia to that expansion. And yet Finland is really a critical country for Russia, being a large border country. So it seems to me that this is not the issue, and it never was the issue. The issue for Russia is as an independent Ukraine, and it's really an issue for Putin himself and some of the people in his Security Council who've never really been able to accept the notion of an independent Ukraine. Putin explained this in his 2021 essay on Ukrainian-Russian relations and how he sees Ukraine. Putin maintains that Ukraine is an artificial state that was created by Lenin in 1922 after the October Revolution in Russia, and that this state has been a sort of figment until 1991 when the Soviet Union collapsed. And that's something we have to take into account, that Putin is not really interested in some kind of new Ukrainian government emerging. He would like to see Ukraine completely subjugated to Russia or removed altogether from the map of Europe. And that is why I think it's so important to stop that. And there's also the fact that Russia has interests in other regions, Moldova, Georgia, where it's already intervened twice and actually invaded, and the Baltic states, which are part of NATO, but it's questionable whether NATO is going to come to defend them if Russia intrudes over their borders. So these are the serious questions that have come up. Poland, with its new president, is also tightening border control with Belarus, and Belarus is now a recipient of nuclear weapons from Russia, so it's very much part of the new equation. This is really like not a new Cold War, but it's something new entirely that we have to address in the West, this idea of a resurgent aggressive Russia with a fairly small economy. It's really only a medium-sized power in terms of its GDP, but nevertheless, militarily, it's able to push a lot with the backing of the nuclear weapons. It's a massive nuclear weapons state, and Russia frequently threatens to use these weapons if the West intrudes too far. And that's a fact we just can't really get around. We don't know how to deal with that. Joe Biden had no idea what to do with that, and I don't think Donald Trump does either.
And there's clearly a complex history between these two countries. David, thank you for joining us today. That's Russian and Ukrainian politics expert David Marples.